For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Thabi Madiba. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss the imagery and identities in Mandela's leadership, part 3. Welcome, Professor.
Good morning.
You stated that from early in his life, Nelson Mandela was very conscious of who he was in relation to others. How so?
Well, he was brought up in the Tembu royal family, not to be a chief, as many people think, but he was destined to be counselor to the future king of the Tembu, Sabata Dalandiebo, and he felt that his world was small. I mean, it was big in that he was in the house of the regent, Chief Jongin Taba Dalandiebo, but it was small in the sense that he didn't meet many whites, didn't meet many Africans who were not Tembu, till he went to Clarkbury School. And when he was at Clarkbury, he realized that there were lots of other people from different places who had lineages that were just as impressive as his, and he had to make his way as an ordinary human being. But when he left there, he reflects, and he says that something like he could think of nothing so fine as to be a Tembu person. So he wasn't thinking of himself as an African, as a South African, or anything like that. So from early on, he's very conscious of who he is. Later on, his being a lawyer is important to him. He dressed in a particular way. I think I've said before here, the way he dressed and the car he drove when he became a lawyer is very similar to that of the gangsters, you see, because the Tutsis used to have fine clothes and Oldsmobiles like his American cars. So he was very conscious later on in life, the other identities that he's very aware of, because every identity that Mandela had required of him certain conduct. Because he was destined to be counselor to the king, he didn't do anything initially that upset the regent, and he behaved in a way that was expected of him. Unlike when you and I grow up, we mix with a lot of people, we do a range of things. He had a life originally that was carved out to be lived in a particular way.
And talking about the way he was wearing, you write that he appeared in court wearing the Abatembu attire. So what is the issue about the attire of officials? Because the EFF were once the victims of wearing the overalls and boots in Parliament.
Now that's like Abatembu attire is now 1961, 62. It's very different from the EFF thing. What he's doing is, he says, I'm a black man in a white man's court. And he's challenging the alien character of the court. He does it with words, but he also does it by wearing the clothes of the Tembu, the dress of the Tembu people. And he's in that situation challenging by not only claiming that black people have been suppressed and oppressed, but he's going back to the days of warrior resistance to conquest. What you're saying about the EFF is a very different thing, although the principle of wearing dress to as a way of communicating ideas is definitely there. If you look at the book I wrote, Recovering Democracy in South Africa, I do talk there about red being the colour of blood and the workers' blood, and they were asserting that as being one of the identities that they had. The fighters' notion is by the sort of militarized dress, but also the domestic workers are uniform of the women is to emphasize them representing the poorest of the poor. It's a different time, different context, different imagery, but what is common to both of them is that dress is a neglected language, because not only dress, other gestures, the clenched fist is a gesture, a range of other songs, dances signify something.
And can you tell us how the imagery around Mandela as the boxer, a sport in which he engaged in with considered discipline, prefigured his later becoming a fighter of a different type?
Well, I can't say that there's a direct, conscious link between becoming a boxer and becoming a freedom fighter, because when he took up boxing at school, I think that when he first started it, the idea of even politics was not in his mind. But when you are a boxer, you have to follow. He wasn't like a successful professional boxer or anything like that, but he was very serious about it. Now, if you're serious about boxing, it's a bit like a marathon runner. You have to follow a diet. You have to avoid eating some things. You have to train every day. And a lot of this is very similar to being a soldier. They refer to it sometimes as a monastic type discipline required of a boxer. Now, that was what was required of an MK soldier ultimately. So, in a sense, when he is photographed as a boxer, it is the imagery of a fighter, and it is prefiguring the notion of being a fighter of another type as well.
And can you briefly talk to us about the difference between the post-1976 toy that emerged when Mandela was released from prison and the toy that Jacob Zuma deployed in his rape trial?
Yeah, you know, when Mandela came out of jail, people had been toying, and the origins of toy, some people say it's from Zipra in Zimbabwe. There's some of the words that are used that may indicate that it actually comes from earlier on. But the toy is a war dance. It's a primarily masculine dance, although women do toy. It's an aggressive dance. You sing songs about hit or shoot, and a range of things like this, which are associated with war and fighting. When Mandela came out of jail, he had started initiated talks which the ANC engaged in with the apartheid regime, and he wanted to assure people in a range of ways that he was serious about making peace, that they didn't have to fear black people being the majority in future democracy. And the way he entered the toying groups was in no ways threatening. It was not a question of shoot, hit, all these things. It was actually, you had these pictures of him smiling, shuffling along. And I think Mandela himself, or Graça Machel says this about Mandela, he knew exactly what he wanted to do when he came out. And he wanted to reassure people. And this is, this is very different from Zuma. In his rape trial, every day after the court, he and the SACP and the COSATU and the Youth League allies all danced with him as he sang Umshini Wam, Bring Me My Machine Gun. Now that's first of all militaristic. Secondly, it has imagery which in some ways replicates a sexual act or rape, and the bullets going off is like ejaculation. So it was a very, very different type of, it was threatening, very different from Mandela being reassuring. So what both of these dances bring to us is that when we want to understand something, words are not the only source. Imagery of a range of types, the clothes people wear, the gestures that they use, all these things are sources. Someone refers to the neglected archive of fashion. Now, it's not so much fashion we're talking about here, but just dress.
And lastly, you write that Mandela, who was in prison, was remembered as a dignified man and yet angry man. So can you tell us from your personal experience of being present for such a long period, does prison maybe have an impact on a person's behavior? Or?
Well, you know, Mandela, you see, I didn't have the responsibilities of Mandela. So when I came out of jail, I don't know how different I was, although I didn't have to come in and have to, I had to conduct myself in a particular way, because when you come out of prison, when you go to prison and you've been doing secret illegal work, people didn't know that you were doing that. When you come out, you're seen as a representative of the liberation struggle. So you have to conduct yourself in a way that does not reflect badly on them. You can't go and shoplift or something like that if you are seen as a member of the ANC or the Communist Party. But Mandela had different responsibilities. When he went to jail as the commander of Umkhonto we Sizwe, and he was seen as a person who was the preeminent representative of resistance. He had gone underground for 17 months. This was unprecedented in South African history, that you had, Joe Slovo refers to him as the first professional revolutionary, a full-time revolutionary. So he went to jail as a revolutionary. He came out as a person who had to make the peace work. And he says to Richard Stengel, who worked with him on Long Walk to Freedom, that he matured in prison, became a different person. He used to get angry, he still got angry afterwards, also with me, but he used to, sometimes shoot from the hip, like when they were having the Sophiatown removals, he said, we'll go over our dead bodies. And he was reprimanded because they didn't decide an armed struggle at the time of the Sophiatown removals. When he came out, those sorts of qualities had to be repressed. However, when de Klerk betrayed him, he got very angry. You are too young for this, but in 1991 or 2, at Codesa, Mandela just let de Klerk have it. And it had been in this period where there'd been this sweet talk. And he said, even from the leader of an immoral, illegitimate regime, we expect some integrity. And then she let him have it. And I remember someone said to me, in the townships, it was as if Orlando Pirates or Kaiser Chiefs had won, and people were so happy to see this. It was part of the old Mandela coming up again. But also, you know, with us in the ANC leadership, he was very obstinate, so that if you stood against him, sometimes he would get very angry, but he didn't hold grudges or anything like that.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about the imagery and identities in Mandela's leadership, Part 3.